transportation organizations. I'm your moderator, Becky Burke, of the Maryland Department of Transportation State Highway Administration. This is the second of a two-part series that was a result of a session of the same name, which was well received at TRB in January 2017. It was session 271, if you're interested. The presenters in these two webinars are the same presenters that were in the TRB session 271. This two-part series highlights specific knowledge management approaches and techniques with specific applications in transportation organizations. It is designed for, but not limited to, staff within human resources, engineering, research, planning, or information technology functions who are interested in starting up a knowledge management initiative or pilot and want to gain an operational understanding of what would be involved. These two sessions will provide stories and information from professionals who have implemented knowledge management in their organizations. And just to let you know, this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted online on the website netwc.net. But don't worry, a direct link will be in the follow-up email, the webinar follow-up email. And also, I'd like to remind you to use the chat pod to ask questions, which we will collect and answer at the end of both presentations. So first up is Dr. Shelley Glass. Dr. Glass has almost 25 years of federal civilian experience with the Army, Air Force, and Navy. She developed graduate level curriculum at the U.S. Army War College and established 4 knowledge management programs for the Army's Logistics Innovation, the Army's Human Resources Command, and currently the U.S. Southcom. As the U.S. Southcom's Chief Knowledge Officer, Dr. Glass leads the command's knowledge management program in project management and business process re-engineering capabilities. She actively networks with leaders of the industry, academia, professional associations, and other government agencies on knowledge management. Dr. Glass speaks frequently at conferences as a guest presenter for university courses and via webinars. And now I will turn it over to Dr. Glass.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I come to you from beautiful, sunny South Florida in Miami, and I'd like to present this afternoon a real-world scenario on how we actually implemented our gold standard knowledge management program within a United States military combatant command. Next slide, please. So this first slide shows the agenda and the different items that I plan on presenting to you. Next slide. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the United States Southern Command first of all. The United States military has divided up the world in different zones or regions, if you will, to assist those countries at the country's request in various aspects of disaster, emergency, humanitarian relief. And the United States Southern Command's area of responsibility is Central and South America, as well as the Caribbean. Our current commander is a 4-star Navy admiral, and his goal for our command at this time during his leadership is, number one, is rapid response. And I will show you later on how we use knowledge management to rapidly respond to a natural disaster that hit Haiti during Hurricane Matthew. We prepared not only humanitarian assistance like medical, but we also want to we went into Haiti to help to provide security measures during that time of crisis for them. His second area of interest is to protect our southern borders from transregional threat networks. These networks include, we are trying to combat trafficking of illegal drugs, money, trafficking of persons, and also to counter the effects of transnational organized crime networks. We also have a responsibility for detainee operations at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. And most importantly, we want to strive to be the partner of choice by building up public and also private relationships with countries within our area of responsibility, or called AOR. I had to get that acronym in there because the military uses all kinds of acronyms, and so AOR is one that I will be using with you today. Next slide, please. So as was mentioned previously, I have started 4 different knowledge management efforts. Every one of them has been different. Every structure has been different. Where I was located within the command has been different. But within the U.S. Southcom, this is our structure. The purple area is our commander, emphasized by the 4 stars. Underneath of him is a 2-star general chief of staff, and that is who I actually work for, is the chief of staff. That's the red oval there, the CKO. Around that, I do have a knowledge management working group that is comprised of representatives from each one of those J circles. The J1 is our personnel, J2 is intelligence, J4, for example, is logistics, and that is where you all would primarily fall under. So I have representatives in the KM working group from each one of those. I also have representatives from our components and what's called our joint task forces, which are down actually in Central and South America. And that particular group, we develop for the entire command where we think the command should go with within the knowledge management functions. Admiral Tidd, right now, he understands KM 100%. He speaks the language. He's very, very supportive. He realizes that he wants to flatten our organization and get rid of some of the stovepipes that may be in place. And so I am really looking forward to working and continuing to work with him on our knowledge management initiatives. Our office, my office, is made up of 1 government employee and 1 contractor for the entire Central and South America and the Caribbean. So I rely heavily on these representatives within the J codes to help me out. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you see what I call the Parthenon chart, and you are more than welcome to take and use this as you might see fit. This was developed by a small group of us back in 2008 when we were pretty much fledglings in the KM arena within the Department of Defense. And you'll see that the yellow columns represent the people and the culture. The blue represents business processes, and the green is the tools and technology. To be honest with you, I don't really delve that much now in the tools and technology because we do have a directorate that takes care of that, but I do work very closely with them to bring in the tools and technology piece. One of the things that I'd like to point out to you is that very first column that says KM Train and Educate. We currently do that. We've developed an in-house KM Fundamentals and Leadership course that we offer about once every other month. And we have recently been taking that out onto the road down in Honduras, down in Key West, Florida, out to Arizona where our Air Force components are. And we're getting ready to present that class in Texas to another one of our components. So please take that and use it, as you would like to, particularly those of you who are new to KM. That might help you to kind of zero in on where your emphasis should be. Next slide, please. So I'd like to present to you how we've actually taken some of our KM principles and how we were able to rapidly implement it during Hurricane Matthew, which happened just a few months ago, and dramatically hit Haiti. Back in 2010, they had an earthquake that devastated them. And now, just recently with the hurricane that came through. During this emergency, we found that some of the things that we had in place worked extremely well, and we found that there were some areas that we needed to tweak, and we're in the process of doing that. But also there were areas that we wanted to bring on board, like using chat rooms, and our culture was just very resistant on wanting to use chat rooms. But during Hurricane Matthew, we found the value, my culture found the value of using chat rooms, because it cut down the response time dramatically from perhaps hours to just minutes using the chat rooms. Next slide, please. So some of the KM tools that we use, because we try, and our mantra is to be fast, flat, and agile. And so I already mentioned to you the chat rooms that we used. We also extensively use SharePoint collaboration sites in order to capture our lessons learned. So if this should happen again, or if any instance should happen again, at least we have something that we can start off with and build from there rather than starting from scratch. We also use the All Partners Access Network, which we call APAN. That was a very similar to SharePoint in that we shared our information, and from there we had a gentleman up in the Pentagon who would share it with the Red Cross, with United Nations, and higher up in that realm. We use video teleconferencing extensively because we wanted to be sure that we were sharing and collaborating, that we had full transparency as much as we possibly could. We wanted also to have a continuous battle rhythm during this emergency situation, and we used our video teleconferencing and our chat rooms extensively for that. We also were able to fold in our senior leaders, so instantly they would have availability of the information that they also needed. One of the things we tried to de-emphasize is email whenever we possibly could, because we realized that that was a potential single source of failure for us, and it just in many, many cases took far too long to share information using email. Next slide, please. So one of the other gold standards that I'd like to share with you that is within the Department of Defense is that we have a Department of Defense KM joint working group. We meet once or twice a month. We are made up of all military components worldwide, whether we are Navy or whether we are in Korea. We join that working group. Mostly we are there to kind of show and share some of our successes and also some of our challenges. Recently, however, we have been developing, and we have developed and are waiting for it to be signed, a Department of Defense instruction, which will be an overarching KM governance that will be a guideline for all military services. The other thing I wanted to share with you is that there is a federal KM working group that meets once a quarter, I believe. It was sponsored by the FBI at one time and has now been turned over to NASA. And one of the things that they have been doing is, again, a show and share, because we want to, pass on our successes, our lessons learned, so other people can choose to try, some of the things that we have found to be successful. So I have, next slide please. I've tried to present to you in growing hierarchy, if you will, what my particular KM organization looks like, how we were able to use some of our processes, and also how at the DoD level and also at the federal level that the KM has grown, and how we try and practice what we preach, if you will. On this last slide is my information. You are more than welcome to email me or call me if you like, and I can share, anything that I have. I am happy to share my KM framework, my governance documents, my charter for the KM working group. I've even developed for those of you who are in any kind of a performance appraisal system, I have a blurb, if you will, that your folks can use to be measured so they get credit for the KM work that they do. So that's my presentation this afternoon, and I look forward to any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. We're going to, if you can stick around, I know if you can't, we're going to hold our questions till the end, and we'll get some in the chat pod. Next, okay, and if not, some people will mail them in, and we'll get back to them after the webinar. Next is Dr. Maureen Hammer. Dr. Hammer is a principal researcher with Patel Memorial Institute in Knowledge Management and has over 25 years of experience in information and knowledge management. During that time, she has created and managed library and information services and knowledge management programs in a variety of industries and is an acknowledged expert in knowledge management in government organizations. She was the knowledge officer for one of the largest state departments of transportation and was responsible for creating a program to support knowledge transfer, information services, succession planning, and content and document management. She has significant experience in knowledge transfer tools and techniques, the development and maintenance of knowledge portals and business intelligence delivery systems, information and library services, taxonomy creation, content and document management, and knowledge architecture. She has expertise in leadership and management theory and practice, organizational development, succession planning, change management, and conflict management as both a professor and practitioner. So now I will turn it over to Dr. Hammer.
Thank you, Becky. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this afternoon. So my presentation is all about one size doesn't fit all. Start where you are. And I'd like to start out by saying that knowledge management has been defined in a multitude of ways. So today I'm going to provide you an overarching definition as well as define the roles you might take when leading a KM effort. Many organizations already do elements of KM, but that might not be what it is called. So we'll talk about what you can or are doing in relation to the goals you are trying to meet. And we'll end with some final thoughts and lessons learned over a 20-year-plus career in creating and implementing KM programs in a variety of organizations and industries. So who does it? Knowledge management has roots going back in history. One of the first examples would be guilds and the apprenticeship models. Sorry, I was getting some interference. One of the first examples would be guilds and the apprenticeship model used to train and teach young and inexperienced people a trade and how to succeed in a given field. These individuals were not just provided technical training, but also the soft skills and knowledge to prosper. Post-World War II, research began to delve into knowledge engineering and artificial intelligence in an attempt to teach machines how to think like humans. And in the 1960s, a Nobel Prize winner in economics, Kenneth Arrow, explored the economic implications of learning by doing. So who does KM today? Just about everyone, although it has flourished in those sectors listed in the first bullet. The term knowledge management emerged in the late 1980s and early 1990s as a response to the realization that valuable organizational knowledge, the collective knowledge that makes a company unique, was at risk and that the loss could compromise a company's ability to compete or operate in an increasingly complex environment. The original focus was on the private sector and the non-tangible assets of a company. By the late 1990s, military and government organizations began to pursue it as well. And in the second bullet, we look at how the transportation sector has cultivated private and public sector knowledge management communities, and in fact has established a task force on knowledge management under the Transportation Research Board. So what is knowledge management? It is, of course, tailored to your particular organization, so you'll hear it explained in many different ways. What I am providing to you here today is a general definition. So generally, it can be defined as the identification, collection, organization, dissemination, and use of critical knowledge within an organization. It's an attempt to define what knowledge is and what knowledge an organization employees hold, who has need of it, and how to provide it to the right people at the right time. So what I want to pull out of that definition is the word knowledge. So what is knowledge? And as I stated there, it can be defined as the technical, social, and political information individuals have learned through formal and informal learning. It could be explicit, more commonly known as information, or tacit, which is really about the experience and expertise each individual has and is greatly influenced by the context in which it is being used. There have been 3 generations of knowledge management. The first centered on IT and how to use technology to capture and transfer explicit knowledge. At the time, it was believed all knowledge could be identified and turned into information that could be shared through systems. The second generation shifted the focus to people and how to transfer knowledge between them and to support the creation of new knowledge. The third generation seeks to combine the two and to use semantic technology applications to improve knowledge discovery. Knowledge management theory and practices emerge from and combine elements from a variety of intellectual disciplines such as economics, sociology, library science, human resources, and development and learning, as well as information technology. There are many roles that you can take on individually or collectively when creating or implementing a KM program in your organization. All of these are important and they're dependent on where you're at. So I noticed at the poll that some of you were at the beginning stages of wanting to develop a plan, and some had developed a plan for KM in their organization, and we're trying to move on to the next step. So let's walk through these roles. When you are heading up a KM program, these are the roles that you would take on. So as a strategist, you're really defining the role of KM in your organization to reach its goals and objectives. You also need to be a persuader. You have to make a business case to the leadership to invest in knowledge management techniques and approaches that make sense to them. You need to be an organizer and provide oversight and infrastructure to KM activities. You need to be a facilitator, providing active support to participants in KM activities, and you need to be a measurer. You have to ensure that there are quantitative and qualitative metrics that demonstrate the value of KM to your organization. So what's right for you? So what is the purpose of knowledge management in an organization? If knowledge is uncodified and based on the expertise and experience of your individual employees, how does an organization manage and leverage it? Under the umbrella term of KM, there are many techniques that can be used to mitigate the potential loss of knowledge due to retirements in the changing workforce, to make knowledge and information findable, to improve performance, and to support innovation. Let's look at each of these goals or needs and the tools you can use to address them. So are you trying to mitigate potential knowledge loss through perhaps retirements or workforce transitions? It's necessary to provide a framework and support structure to promote knowledge sharing and transfer, as well as create redundancy of that knowledge within the organization so that you can decrease future risk. Tools that might be employed are knowledge audits, communities of practice, expertise locators, job shadowing, and mentoring. Attaching knowledge artifacts to process maps and forms, retiree reemployment, which I know is very difficult in government, and holding workshops led by experts. So what's an example? The Army Defense Acquisition community has a long history in addressing this particular issue. They've created portals to house necessary information to perform tasks, including an online encyclopedia of pertinent topics. This is supplemented by online communities of practice in specific areas to share expertise and experience on how to successfully perform the work. When you put these together, you have the information and rules about how to do the work, along with experts who can share how to do it and best practices. So what can you do? You can create a community of practice for one of your functional areas, such as right-of-way, and have them create an encyclopedia of the work that they do. This results in an authoritative source created by experts who are then available to answer questions and coach lesser tenured staff in what and how to do something. But maybe what you want to do is to make knowledge and information findable. Portals or repositories to house explicit knowledge or information are an underlying theme to many KM efforts. It is not enough, though, to store it. If it can't be found when it's needed, it's just taking up space. To make knowledge and information findable, you must first identify the critical knowledge and information necessary to support various functions in your organization, and then you need to organize and tag it so that regardless of the way someone approaches the job, they can find what they need. And third, you need to integrate it with the work and standard operating procedures, because if people have to go out of their way to look for that knowledge, chances are they won't. Do you want to increase performance? I'm sorry, I think I'm off a little bit. Do you want to decrease time for completion of tasks or better integrate functions? Or do you want to streamline processes? Building on lessons learned and developing best practices, streamlining processes, and engaging in double loop learning, not just fixing a problem, but figuring out why it happened, developing a solution, sharing that with others, and returning to evaluate it regularly will lead to improved performance and increased efficiency, doing things right, and effectiveness, doing the right things for the organization. The Army instituted after-action reviews to support that. Lessons were learned not just by the individual, but by others who might benefit, and to lead to best practices that would improve future performance. Merck, a major pharmaceutical company, uses after-action reviews to improve performance within plants, to reduce variability and improve performance, and has now moved the same focus into their supply chain as a whole. What is learned in the lessons from the reviews is incorporated into processes to reduce errors, improve time, and increase productivity. Better performance can also be realized by developing checklists of best practices following learning from after-action reviews, as demonstrated by the FAA. Engaging communities of practice to share, develop, and vet lessons learned and best practices was also an approach used by Buckman Labs, Xerox, and BP. All three engaged experts in face-to-face or virtual communities to share knowledge and expertise that would lead to process improvements while supporting participants and expanding their own knowledge base and expertise. So what can you do? You can create a community of practice of experienced construction inspectors and have them build checklists to be used on the job. And you can do this with any functional area. You can incorporate after-action reviews of major projects, and the results can be used to build best practices for future projects. Then you don't have to keep learning the same lessons over and over again. But what if what you want to do is support innovation? Communities of practice and networks are used extensively to support innovation and adaptability of the organization. The UK National Health Service is focused on putting the physician in the driver's seat and freeing hospitals to innovate. And they have chosen to establish virtual and physical networks that will allow the quick sharing of new clinical practices as a primary way in which they intend to achieve those goals. Another approach can be knowledge cafes, such as Tata uses, to bring together individuals to share and collaborate on new ideas. FMC Technologies uses an online portal to capture innovative ideas that can be examined, evaluated, and supported by experts. Innovation requires that the CEO and leadership of the organization be actively engaged and promote a knowledge-sharing environment. You too can create a mechanism for employees to submit innovative ideas and then use a community of practice with expertise in that area to vet it, and if accepted, to promote its use. Determining what your goal is, whether that be promoting knowledge sharing, improving findability of information, mitigating the potential loss of knowledge, improving performance, or supporting innovation, determines which tools to use. Performing a knowledge audit to identify where and with whom critical knowledge resides is a good first step, as this will help you understand where your focus should be and how to prioritize your activities. You can find a KM toolkit in NCHRP 2098 that discusses knowledge audits, and you can see from the discussion before that deploying one tool of knowledge management, such as communities of practice, can lead to results in many areas. Knowledge sharing, innovation, performance improvements. What must be present regardless of the goal is a leadership team that actively supports and engages in the knowledge activities. And I have to say that when I was at the Virginia Department of Transportation, we did have that. I would also say that communities of practice were a basis for our entire program, although we engaged in all 4 of these goals. By bringing together experts who have long-term knowledge of the organization as well as the particular area in which they work and letting them share that with folks that are new to the organization or in different areas of the organization can lead to improved processes, less frustration, and a lot of innovation. Now here's the big slide, major lessons learned. So as final thoughts, knowledge management tools and approaches can help you create a workforce that's high performing and innovative and that allows employees to learn and retain critical knowledge to be efficient and effective and for the organization to be adaptive to changing needs. Knowledge is part of a process rather than an object, and it has to be recognized that it's effective by the organization's structures and systems. Developing a culture that embraces and expects knowledge sharing and that sees that participation as a responsibility is key. So here's my major lessons learned. I've created and implemented knowledge management in several different organizations in several different industries over the last 25 years. And these lessons have held true all the way through. The first one is sustainability. Number one, you have to understand that KM is very personal. It's very tied to individuals. If you're asking someone to share the knowledge that they have, they need to understand what's in it for them and to understand that by sharing that knowledge, they actually gain additional power. You also have to understand that it's very personal to who's running the program. Your strength and my strength may not be the same and our approaches may be different. That doesn't mean that they're not both necessary or can be successful in what they're trying to accomplish. It needs to be aligned. Organizational goals change over time. I know my experience in the DOT is we had a new governor every 4 years, and so with each administration, their goals did change, and we needed to change with those. And measurement. If you can't show value in their terms, they'll lose interest. There are always opportunities, and the first one is that you never say no, you find a way to say yes. You build on what is there because you're validating what they already know or did. And you need executive buy-in, but you also need grassroots participation. So you have to manage this program from both ends of the spectrum. As far as culture goes, leadership needs to understand that it's a responsibility to share knowledge and expertise and to pass that on to the rest of the organization. So it's not just that it's good to do, but that everybody has a responsibility to contribute. Management needs to make time for employees to participate, and I guarantee that that is going to be based on how much you can show them under the measurement category. And trust. You have to believe in sharing, and you have to be willing to ask. One of the major challenges that you will meet is skepticism. People want to know how this will help me, and you need to be prepared to answer that. You're going to run into barriers regardless, but if you keep your eye on the goal, there's always a way, and you need to make sure that you don't get distracted. And again, you need to recognize that knowledge is personal, but that it is needed by others. My personal experience in government is that most people want to share. The biggest issue is finding the time. And again, that comes back to convincing management that it's worth their while. So you may face challenges in implementing KM, whether that be a lack of understanding of what that is and how knowledge can be managed, whether people are reluctant to share what they know or they fear the loss of power or importance to the organization. They may be willing to share what they know, but they don't think they have a lack of time. They may have a willingness to share what they know, but they don't know how or don't view the knowledge as critical. You may perceive that you have a lack of support from leadership and management, so go to where you can get that support and do some pilots so that you can show them that you can be successful. Or there may be a lack of processes and tools that allow knowledge to be shared easily. And that you can turn to your IT and your library folks to help you develop a taxonomy or a portal that integrates into the work that people are doing. The information that's been provided in these 2 webinars should help you mitigate those challenges, or at least that's our hope. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. We wanted to make sure that we left enough time for questions. So if you need to contact me, here's my information. Otherwise, I'm going to turn this back over to Becky.
Thank you, Maureen. That was wonderful. Shelley's was wonderful too. I don't want to exclude anyone. We did get a couple questions before the webinar started when a reminder was sent out. And the first one, I think, Maureen, you already touched on, but the question is, how do you guide KM implementation in a culture where knowledge is power?
So that happens in every organization. So what you want to do is figure out where people are feeling the most pain, and so a knowledge audit can help with that, and then go and be very persuasive with the person that leads that, and demonstrate to them that 1, you know what you're talking about, 2, that you have a solid plan, and 3, that you're going to measure whether or not that was successful. So one of the things that we did was do an audit at the DOT to find out what the major pain points were under the guise of project management. And the 2 that came up were right-of-way and quality. So we went to the right-of-way folks because there's not really a degree in that particular field. People come into it from different areas. And in the case of Virginia, at that time, 80% of the managers were post-eligible for retirement, and so they did see a need. And we were able to go to the chief who oversaw that section and persuade him that in order to get the experienced right-of-way folks to replace these people in a timely fashion, there were certain steps that needed to be taken. And so we kicked off a community of practice. We had them do an analysis of the work that they did and then figure out a way to cross-train people across regions, which was a big step for that particular organization, and then develop an encyclopedia that explained to people how they managed different things that would come up within their work. And we were able to prove that in the next big project that there was a decreased time spent on right-of-way acquisition, which saved a considerable, well, it avoided a cost for that project that was then available for other activities, and that convinced other people to jump in.
Thank you. We got another question. Either one can answer. How did you get the top management buy-in, and how did you make your economic case for KM? Like, how much value or money does it add to your organization?
Is Shelley still on the line?
Shelley, are you there? Okay, Maureen, I guess you're
okay.
I'm still here.
Oh, you're here?
Oh, okay. I didn't want to leave her out. Did you want to answer that? Okay.
Let me start, since I may have to drop off. We got buy-in. We have various levels of buy-in, and it really depends on who our commander is. So we've had some that prefer to just pick up the phone and talk, and our current commander is very KM savvy and is so progressive that we're trying our best to kind of keep up with them. But in the previous question, I wanted to let you know that the one way that we were able to change our culture is for them to finally see the value of, for example, chat rooms and how it could shorten response times for them, because we had been kind of beating our heads against the wall to try and get people to get into chat rooms and use chat rooms, and it was like, oh, it's just another thing for me to monitor. And we would say, but you don't stare at your telephone monitoring it to ring. When it rings, you answer it, and it's the same with the chat. You know, when it pings, then you can check and see if you can respond or not. So it actually, we were able to show success that way, and our commander is very receptive on trying whatever it is that works that is in our tool bag, and so consequently we are trying to, like I said, keep up with him as best we can.
Okay, let's see. Maureen, did you want to address the second question, or I can go on? We have more.
Well, if we have more, let's go on.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to read it here. Let me scroll up. Well, it had something about trying to get the relationship between IT and emerging information management data analysis activities. I can't read the whole question, but I don't know if this relates to it or not. I know, oh, here it is. Say a little about the role of KM in relation to IT and emerging information management data analysis activities.
Okay. I'll go ahead and jump in on that one. So I have headed up KM programs that actually were based out of IT and programs that were in another area of the organization that just worked with IT. I think that the biggest thing there is to sit down with them and talk about the information needs and to sketch out really what it is you're trying to accomplish. And what you need to have at the end, and letting the IT folks actually build that system that you need. One of the things that I've learned is they're very good at being responsive to those needs, but when it comes to actually organizing and designing it, you need to pull in people who understand how people interact with different systems, and you need to pull in people like librarians to help organize information. We also got involved because of our success with data management as well. So I think one of the things that you emphasize with the KM program is one of the things that it can help with is content and document management and organizing that and making it available, and that you should be the business owner that works with IT to manage those particular activities in the organization. I hope that answered the question.
I'd like to second what Maureen said about. I'd like to second what Maureen said about having a librarian on your team. I had a library background, and that's basically how I got into KM. But librarians are trained to organize information, to provide a sharing environment for information. And so I have found that having someone with a library science background has proven valuable for a number of reasons.
While we're on that, you both kind of touched on it. Could you tell the audience the difference between information and knowledge?
Well,
go ahead.
Sure. Here in this Department of Defense instruction that we're waiting for signature, we address that specifically because we wanted folks to realize that there is a difference between data and information and content. So if you imagine a triangle, for example, the data is all of that, those bits and pieces, those facts and figures or whatever, and then out of all of that comes the next level, which is information. It may be static information, it may be something that you needed to know, but Google, for example, is a collection of all types of information, but until you actually need that specific information and you take it and you use it for whatever your purpose is, that's when, in my opinion, it becomes knowledge for you. And you can look at that information and you can decide, oh yes, I want to use this, or no, this is not exactly what I'm looking for.
And this is Maureen. I'm going to second what she said. I think what you need to think about is that information is also an artifact or a representative of the knowledge that's out there. You can't possibly write down every scenario or every clue about when that information is going to be needed. That's in people's heads. So collecting the basics of that and providing people with directions to people who can help interpret what that information is and bring their expertise and experience to bear on it to make a decision. To me, that's the difference. So you can think about music. So the score of the music is the information, but the way that it's played depends on knowledge. So no two musicians are going to play something exactly the same.
Okay, we're getting lots of questions in here. Let me try to go quickly. How do you integrate chat room with other new media like Wiki?
Well, I'll answer that because that's an easy question. Because we are Department of Defense, we are sometimes, depending upon where we're located and which branch of service we work with, we have been very slow on implementing and using social media, whether it's tweet or wiki or whatever. Primarily is because of our firewalls and some of our security. I do wish that we were, more flexible in that avenue, but internally we are finding that chat and video conferencing is, and we can do both of those at different security levels, that we're finding that that's becoming very successful internally.
And I would say for DOTs, there are software packages out there that integrate things like wikis and chat, and an example would be like LibGuides or SharePoint. You can put widgets on the SharePoint that allow you to open up a chat if your organization supports that. And if you like, you can find ways to then integrate that into the wiki that you're using. So it is much easier technically now than it used to be, as long as your organization supports that software.
This looks like a follow-up question on the same thing. Shelley, I think you almost answered this in your presentation. What is the percentage of time you gained by using chat room against conventional telephone, text message, or email?
Well, I would say with email, for us, when we're working on an emergency situation, email, like I mentioned, is we have found is a single point of failure for us. Sometimes you're waiting, a couple of hours, sometimes not, but you're also waiting to see if that individual that you sent the email to is available. Whereas the chat room, we had lots of people in the contingency chat room, regardless of where they were located. And I would say, and I'm just guessing because I haven't really finished the statistics, if you will, but I would say we saw at least an 80% improvement in getting information to the right people at the right time during the 2 weeks that we had our boots on the ground in Haiti.
Wow. Okay, I have another one. What would you how would you answer or say to your CEO when they think that starting a KM program is just putting all your policies and procedures on a shared drive?
Personally, I would suggest doing a little show and share with them that, sure, we can start with that, but look at all these other successes that are out there, and point to other avenues and other areas. If you can find percentages of improvement, to pull that into, particularly if you've got a person that speaks quantitatively rather than qualitatively. So that's what I would suggest attempting to do.
Okay, thank you. Maureen, you got any comments on that?
Well, I was going to say that was something that was requested, but what we were able to quickly prove was that it wasn't enough just to put the policies and procedures. Maybe we should also put the forms, and then to make it possible for people to fill those forms out so they could take that action at that time. And then people discovered that they needed examples, so we showed that linking to other documents that weren't the formal corporate documents proved helpful. So it's a path that you have to go along. If they invite you to pull all those policies and procedures together, use that as your springboard to do other things.
Okay, thank you. That looks like all the questions for now. So I guess we will wrap it up. Maureen or Shelley, you have anything else to add? If not, I'll wrap it up. Okay. Well, thank you, Shelley. And oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. Was someone going to say something? Okay. Well, thank you, Shelley and Maureen, for your time and participation, and thank you, audience, for your time and participation. It's our hope that you learned something from these two seminars, something useful, and hopefully you can pull something out of that. And you also saw there's a website that's showing now that you can, where the PowerPoints can be found, so you can get the contact information if you have any more questions. And that about does it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Becky.
Thank
you. And
you.
thanks, everyone, for attending.
Yes.